and Crypto Regulation Conference in London. And here with you, Anna Tutova, co-founder of Coins Telegram Media Group, and our honored guest, Kristin Johnson, CFTC Commissioner. Great to have you here, Kristin.
Thanks so much, Anna. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join you today.
Yeah, so we have from the last week such a turmoil time with the FTX collapse and bankruptcy, and as well you have been talking a lot during your presentation about that, and as well in your previous interviews, particularly last week with Bloomberg, and additionally you mentioned about the development of regulatory framework giving CFTC the more power to overlook the spot market. So in your thoughts, do we need to strengthen the regulatory authority over the crypto markets?
This is a great question, Anna, and I'd like to share the reflection that I shared with Bloomberg last week, which is in these contexts, it's really important to never let a good crisis go to waste. Behind that thought, I'm suggesting that we look carefully and understand exactly what has transpired. It will take some time to fully to gather information and to fully understand what transpired at FTX, but that is also true of other entities that have had liquidity crises recently. I'm thoughtful about Three Arrows Capital and Celsius Network. There are likely a number of factors that we do not yet have full information with respect to. So I think it's first important to do the necessary due diligence and gather and understand what has happened. In the midst of this, though, we know that there are many investors and consumers, customers who've been tremendously impacted, some in devastating ways. And so we're deeply thoughtful about ensuring the integrity of firms operating in the digital asset space, and ensuring that these types of harms do not happen again. So here, I believe it is the case that we need first, as a first order, legislative intervention in the adoption of formal legislation that would resolve the question of spot market jurisdiction in the digital asset or cryptocurrency space. We are looking to Congress and are engaged with Congress in developing legislation that would effectively prevent events such as those that have transpired from occurring again. I think as Congress is working, and we are working alongside them to build a legislative framework, a statutory framework, we are also deeply thoughtful about and engaged in creating a regulatory framework. And that regulatory framework historically would have protected customer assets by requiring the segregation of customer funds and limiting reinvestment of customer funds. It would have also required liquidity reserves for any entity that is registered and operating in our markets to ensure the operational integrity of the firm. The liquidity reserve requirement often obligates firms to have 1 year of operating capital available and set aside. This ensures or attempts to ensure against a liquidity crisis that leading to a bankruptcy event. These are the kinds of protections we have historically introduced in the markets that we regulate and oversee, and I think it's important that we integrate them into digital asset markets. For those innovative entrepreneurs who wish to have businesses thrive in this space, it's important that we build an ecosystem that is safe and sound for customers to participate and trust that their capital is preserved. It also is the case that it's important to ensure against contagion. And by contagion, I mean to signal that if a business in the crypto or digital asset ecosystem fails or has a significant liquidity crisis, that crisis may impact a number of other businesses operating in the ecosystem. And so these kinds of protections work to ensure the integrity of not just individual firms, but of the broader ecosystem as well.
And this was another regulation body, CSC, and can we say that currently CSC has bigger impact in overseeing the crypto sector, and particularly as well recently there was introduced a wide-reaching cryptocurrency regulation bill by Senators Cynthia Lummis and Kirsten Gillibrand. So what are your thoughts about that?
My thoughts are that I am grateful that Congress is taking up the charge. There are many pending bills before the House and the Senate. There is a bill pending before the Senate Ag Committee, which is the Committee of Jurisdiction for the CFTC. That bill, proposed by Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow and Ranking Member Bozeman, attempts to address specifically the ways that the CFTC could begin to integrate the digital asset ecosystem into our regulatory framework. Other bills by Senators Gillibrand and Lummis take a more comprehensive approach and address a broader set of questions. At this point, I will entrust Congress with selecting the best path forward, but note that we are urgently in need of regulatory guidance and regulation that closes the regulatory gap and makes plain how Congress would have the SEC and CFTC take on their roles in closing this gap and ensuring the integrity of markets.
And how is the roles of CFTC and CAC are distributed in the regulation of the crypto markets, and what general roles in the overseeing the sector?
So this is an interesting question, and what I do is offer an illustration that demonstrates how well oversight or authority might work when we close the gap through the legislative process. So many years ago in the over-the-counter swaps market, over-the-counter swaps were traded bilaterally. They were expressly based on congressional mandate, not directly regulated by the SEC or CFTC. And with the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act in 2010, Congress asked the SEC and CFTC to collaborate on creating a regulatory framework for swaps, and designated the SEC and CFTC as the authority to oversee security-based swaps and swaps effectively. We have done great work in collaborating together to build the regulatory framework in that space, and I believe we can leverage that experience to build a regulatory framework in this space as well.
And don't you think that some duties of both authorities double themselves?
I think that, you know, in the current moment, it's all hands to the pump is what I would suggest, which is to say we have very little room for disagreement. We must come together and agree to work effectively to prevent crises like the one that we're seeing now, and to anticipate how we can best ensure the integration of the digital asset ecosystem under the regulatory umbrella.
And how do you see the development of cryptocurrency market within the next years, 2023, 2024? And as well, will the regulators be able to have a bigger impact on this market? And is there any clear roadmap with any sequential steps to regulate the market and the industry?
Well, that's a big question. I think if I could perfectly articulate or anticipate all of that, if I were sufficiently prescient to articulate much of that, I'd happily do so. But it's a big ask. I'd break it into some smaller pieces and just talk about those individual pieces. I think that there are many who anticipate momentum from Congress in the wake of what has happened in recent weeks, but more broadly in recent months. Again, the failure of any one individual firm or market participant is noteworthy, but we have here in the context of this market ecosystem a number of examples of firms having suffered risk management failures and having taken steps to use customer funds in ways that historically in the traditional or TradFi markets we have long disallowed. So I think the urgency of the moment may create momentum, and hopefully that will lead to early 2023 or at some point during 2023 the adoption of formal legislation.
And as well, do you follow other countries' experience in the regulation of crypto? Specifically here now we are in UK, they are making big steps in making better regulations in crypto. So what are your thoughts? Which countries are leading that way?
So here I'm going to say that I don't know that there is a single lead in the context of developing a regulatory framework. I'd like to hope that there is forward momentum to ensure that there is a lowest common denominator, a threshold or a floor beneath which for the jurisdictions that we have regularly partnered with in building out a regulatory framework, we all agree that we will require entities operating in our markets to comply with a basic set of foundational principles. I think that when we think about it that way, what I can signal and share is that we are thoughtful about and in conversation and dialogue with our European counterparts who are drafting and amending and will be implementing MiCA, as well as our UK counterparts here who are deeply engaged in advancing and revising the market bill. So I think there is collaboration and cooperation happening at this point in the context of markets, and I think that that is necessary. It's imperative that that cooperation and collaboration is effective across U.S. financial market regulators, the SEC and CFTC, as well as our prudential counterparts, but also very important that that cooperation and collaboration is global in nature.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts and expertise with us, and hope the regulatory bodies and CFTC will improve the regulations, set up a clear regulatory framework to protect both consumers and as well to allow innovation.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm grateful to be here. Appreciate you interviewing me.